let's talk about Be'lakor, a beefed up Great Unclean One, and a rather cool sounding army-wide special rule with 3 new leaks for the Chaos Demons. Hello and welcome back to Horsebat's Tactics, where today we're talking Demons once more, now confirmed to be the next codex coming from Games Workshop, and in time-honoured tradition we have a whole bunch more rules leaks popping up on the internet. Previously we had some rather intriguing stuff about demon saves that couldn't be modified, 3 deep strike on everything, a whole bunch of damage and defense for corn units, and a few annoying restrictions on things like greater demons and hordes of lesser demons. Today we've got some more stuff though. The Great Unclean One stat line is nice, but I'm most intrigued by this new Warp Storm rule. It seems that every codex that we have dropped we have a slightly different flavour of faction leaks. The interesting stuff for the demons seems to be dropping on various Discord servers and also via a new YouTube channel called Wallace. It seems that at least some of these people have access to a full copy of the codex. They are speaking like they know about all the rules in context and are just giving us snippets of them. Logically that would imply that they have some sort of connection to playtesters, though Games Workshop is rumoured to have let a bunch of those go at some point. That's complete speculation though, it's just how most of the other rumours this year have come out. As always, I'd take leaks and rumours with a pinch of salt until you've actually seen it in print, though I must admit I think that these are pretty convincing. I strongly suspect that these are going to be broadly accurate to what's wound up printed in this book. Obviously I'm not the original source for these, I'm just repeating things that other people have stated elsewhere. I certainly recommend checking out Wallace's channel, which I'll link down in the video description below. He's certainly a faction expert where chaos is concerned, and he seems like a thoroughly nice guy on top of that. I had a quick chat with him and he said that it's okay to talk about his rumours. The main purpose of them is to build up some excitement for the codex, and at least give demon players a bit of reassurance that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. For the factions that have been the last to receive their codexes in 9th edition, it has been a bit of a long slog. Demons are basically the weakest faction in the game at this point, at least the guard got some buffs like Hammer of the Emperor and Armour of Contempt. Apparently he is also one of the contributors to Warhammer as well, and if you are into your chaos tactics then that's certainly worth checking out too. I'll link it down in the video description. I've no doubt they'll be producing a whole bunch of content analysing the Demons decks when it drops. In any case though, let's get into it and talk about the actual rules that have escaped confinement into real space. So first up we have a stat line for the Great Unclean One. I think that some details for this originally appeared on a Discord server and then it got followed up by Wallace's channel with a full stat line, and it does seem considerably beefed up compared with before. Apparently Demons players are only going to be able to take 1 greater demon per detachment now, so I feel like the emphasis might be in making them really big and strong centerpiece models, seeing as they're a more limited resource, and I feel like the stat line of this one perhaps goes along with that. It's movement 7, weapon skill 2+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 7, toughness 8, 22 wounds, 7 attacks, leadership 10, and his demon save is a 4+ against range and 5+ against melee. At least the demon ones that we've seen so far seem to make them hardier against ranged attacks than they do against close combat. The biggest change seems to be his durability. He's got 4 wounds more than he used to have, he used to be 18, and +1 toughness to toughness 8 makes him genuinely quite hard to remove now. It did always seem a bit weird to me how supposedly the really tough greater demon was only toughness 7 and wasn't one of the tougher things out there. I guess you could say that it was represented by his feel no pain and number of wounds, but now he does look like it's going to be more of a slog to shift. The other interesting change durability wise is maybe a bit more of a side grade. Instead of the 5+ feel no pain that Nurgle units got before, it does seem to be going to -1 damage, including on him. And in general it's maybe a slight downgrade, though it's much better against damage 2 stuff. -1 damage or cut things like overcharged plasma or mastercrafted power weapons damage in half, but it will be a bit less effective against things like las cannons or big damage D3+3 shots compared with the old 5+ feel no pain. As with Death Guard, I'm sure a lot of people will be sad to see it go, though -1 damage army-wide for Nurgle still seems pretty nice to me, particularly as it seems to be coming with toughness and wound increases. Just comparing the new datasheet versus the old, say if you were getting hit by las cannons, which are one of the weapons that don't care about the toughness 8, then it still looks like you're coming out slightly ahead. Previously you would have needed about 17 las cannon hits to bring one of these guys down, now you'll need more like 24, so at least against ranged attacks that's really quite a significant upgrade. He will be a bit weaker against things like mortal wounds though that don't care about toughness and don't care about the -1 damage. Overall though, generally a bit tougher. Any points changes would affect his durability per cost though. Otherwise, in terms of weapons, there's quite a bit going on. The Biosword seems to keep a fairly similar profile at strength +1, AP 3 and damage D6, though with 7 attacks rather than 5, that's still going to be quite a lot more. And it's also gained a sweep mode as well, getting double the attacks at strength user, AP3 and damage 1 for chewing through some hordes. Apparently 6s to hit will auto wound the foe as well. Previously it could just reroll wound rolls altogether. I'm not surprised that the sweep mode doesn't have that. If it's just that though, for the main profile it might be a bit more of a side grade, as the reroll wounds was rather good. Otherwise, for the main weapon you have the option to swap that out for a Doomsday Bell, which doesn't have a particularly convincing melee profile, strength 8, AP1 and damage D3. But it looks like its rule for regenerating Nurgle models has changed a bit, apparently regenerating D3 Plague Bearers in the command phase in an aura, as opposed to having to roll for a 4+ for each Nurgle unit within 7 inches. Unless there's any further stipulations on that, that sounds like it'd just go off automatically, so it is a bit more reliable. But previously it could do some slightly strange things like regenerate Mephitic Blight Haulers from the Death Guard. They did have the Nurgle and the Demon keywords, and it was a bit strange getting over 100 points worth of model back on the chance of a coin flip. If it does just key off the Plague Bearer keyword and it works for Plague Drones as well, that could be pretty powerful. Otherwise, in a second hand, you either have the option of a Plague Flail or a Bile Blade. The Bile Blade is strength user, AP3 and damage 2. You do get the full reroll wound rolls, and it also gives you +1 to cast your psychic powers. Seems quite nice, particularly if you've got the Doomsday Bell otherwise, as it at least gives you a pretty decent close combat weapon. As the alternative option for that, you can take the Plague Flail. That one's a shooting attack with D3+3 shots at strength user, AP3 and damage 2. Just a little bit more dangerous than the current one with a couple of extra shots on average. I'm going to guess that slightly strange wording bit about being able to fire it while in combat might be gone. Finally, for weapons, it's got a couple of default options as well. Like Mr. Rotigus, he's also got the option to roll it on people now, which is very, very Nurgle. That's basically a flamer attack at strength 5, AP2 and damage 1, so quite cool that they all get included that for free now. And Mr. Wallace also did clarify in a comment that his attendants also get a few little attacks as well with his Nurglings. They make a fun and fluffy 7 little extra attacks at strength 2, which in reality is rarely going to do that much, besides maybe kill something like an extra guardsman or two. But still, it's kind of fun. Overall, going from 5 to 7 attacks I think is generally going to be a fair bit more dangerous. I can't help but think there's going to be some pretty decent upgrade options in the Codex as well, whether it's exalted greater demons, relics or warlord traits that are a bit more thought out. Finally, he also remains a Psycho with 2 casts. The Nurgle discipline apparently will have a -1 to hit on it still, and also have 1 to cast a 5+ feel no pain on a unit, which I think will be an almost auto-include in any Nurgle force. Even just applied to the Great Unclean One, that's going to make him ridiculously tougher. It basically equates to 50% durability, and does back him up against mortal wounds. If he can cast that each turn, then it seems like this Great Unclean One would just be all around tougher. I think that would add up to gaining around about 70% extra durability against things like las cannons compared with the previous. As well as that, I think I saw somewhere on one of the leaks that he will have some sort of command aura to allow some rerolls for nearby Nurgle units. Currently they only allow a leadership buff for nearby units, and it does seem a bit strange that the greater demons don't really have all that much command ability. Something like reroll 1s to hit or reroll 1s to wound seem pretty appropriate to me. Overall though, looks kind of vastly improved. I can't help but think that the other big centerpiece models are also going to have some pretty hefty improvements of one sort or another. Next up, the other really exciting leak in my opinion out of these 3 is the Warp Storm. This one was mentioned previously, but now it's apparently confirmed to be a monofaction bonus by some rather fun leaks from Discord. The name harks back to their prior to 8th edition rules, where you basically rolled 2d6 on a big table and some random effects happened in game. A lot of the time they were damage effects that would hit most of the things on the table, including some of your own demons from time to time depending on which god was available, or other fun things like summoning units of lesser demons I believe. I must admit I wasn't the biggest fan of the old version of it. It was certainly pretty annoying to play against, but wasn't really all that empowering if you were playing with it either, as it was kind of random. The way that they're implementing it here sounds really quite interesting. Not only do you get a bonus if you're Chaos Demons, but it sounds like they're giving you even more bonus if you're playing just with individual gods rather than allying multiple units in. I guess maybe their thinking is that if you're playing with more and more gods within the list, you'll have access to better units and tools to deal damage with. So if you did just stick to, say, pure Nurgle demons, then you're limiting yourself to only part of a greater codex, and then you get more buffs because you've done that. According to the leaks, if you were a monogod faction or Disciples of Be'lakor, you'd roll 8d6 at the start of the battle round, but for each extra god that you've included in your list after the first, you'd roll 2 fewer. That means that if you were playing an army with units from all different sides of the Chaos Pantheon, you'd be only rolling 2 dice on the Warp Storm table, so not really being able to gain many abilities. But say if you used 2 gods, then you'd have a big 66 to roll at it. Basically, each time you roll a 4+, it gives you a Warp Storm point, and you can use those to spend on abilities for your turn. And I wouldn't be too surprised if there's other ways to generate points or raise the chance of points. I bet some Warlord traits or relics might have some sort of impact, and maybe even squad upgrades like, say, Chaos Icons, which I think they did mention interacted with this mechanic in some way. Then apparently sometime during your turn you basically spend the points. You have a table of different effects with all different costs. Most abilities cost 2 to 3 Warpstorm points, some cost 4+. There's a fair few that apply to the entire army, and some just apply to one god's units only. They didn't say how many generic ones there are, but apparently there's 3 different ones per god, so quite a lot of options to choose from, and apparently they take effects as basically whole army buffs or whole god buffs. Say for example, if you pick one of the Khorne ones, then all of your Khorne units get a certain upgrade. The leaker did give a few examples, though weren't very specific about it. One of them is apparently a +1 to advance and charge. That sounds very Khorne, to be honest. There's one where enemies need to roll a d6 before falling back, and they can't fall back on a 4+, and that sounds very Slaanesh to me. I wouldn't be surprised if that was Slaanesh specific. There's one for shoot or fight when you die, one for +1 AP in melee, and Nurgle has one for healing things somehow. Not sure whether it'd just be healing wounds or resurrecting full models. Without the full rules, it's kind of hard to say just how powerful or impactful this is going to be. Just on the face of it, it does sound like you might be struggling to get too many effects on the go at the same time. Even if you're playing a monogod army or Be'lakor's army, you're still only going to be averaging something like 4 points per turn, and it might be slightly hard to plan around it too much, as you could just roll super unlucky and say get 2 points for a round when you desperately needed a 3-point ability. Still though, there might be ways to manipulate it a fair bit to get a bit more reliability, and being able to choose to pick up particularly powerful army buffs each turn seems like it's quite nice. I guess in theory you might be able to use a defensive one early in the game, and then switch to damage dealing ones as your units get stuck in combat. Finally, and last of the 3 leaks, is a fair bit about Be'lakor. No one appears to have gone through his entire datasheet yet. It's a little bit more bitty this, but a few really quite cool teasers nonetheless. Apparently he's going to be gaining the Supreme Commander keyword, which was kind of surprising that he didn't have this when he was first released. You could argue that he's the faction leader of Chaos Demons, or as near as it gets, a demon prince equally able to draw on the powers of all 4 gods. If so, then that's pretty good news for him. It means that you could have him in a detachment without him taking up an HQ slot, which often tend to be pretty congested in the Demon's army. Next up, as he basically leads a Chaos Undivided army, he allows a multi-god army without having any negative impacts on that Warp Storm table, so if you had Be'lakor in your army, you could mix and match all the different gods and still be rolling those 8d6 presumably. Sounds pretty cool, and like Be'lakor's army, is going to be a very different way to build demons if you want to. Thirdly, as a demon prince, he still doesn't count towards being a greater demon, which means that if detachments were an issue, then you will be able to field him alongside another one within the same detachment, which I guess is quite nice. Maybe not quite as relevant if he is a Supreme Commander, but it means that he can both fill an HQ slot and also be in the same place as a greater demon if it made sense. He is confirmed to have his Army of Renown in the book. I'm going to guess that if that one still played, he still probably wouldn't allow greater demons to be taken in the same army. Finally, there are a few rumoured rules changes, though it's not a really particularly complete picture. Apparently 40 points more than he is now, which will put him at 420, so really quite a big investment, but he certainly seems very hard to take down. 20 wounds at strength 8, toughness 7 and a 4+ demon save, so he has gained 4 wounds from his 16 that he is currently. Now he's -1 to hit and wound at range and in melee. Previously the -1 to wound only applied at range. He still has the thing preventing enemies from re-rolling hits, and apparently also gains -1 damage at range, so he is still even tougher to take down with big guns. There does seem to be a bit of a theme in the Demon's army that they tend to be harder to take down with guns and a bit easier to kill if you get stuck in, but I'm not sure that's usually going to be all the best idea anyway, as the vast majority of Chaos Demons are combat units, so getting stuck into them means they're also going to be getting stuck into you. Overall, it's a bit hard to say how well it's going to add up with only these bits. For these really big centerpiece character models, they usually wind up either being easy auto-includes, or ones that maybe just struggle to quite make the cuts, like Magnus was for the Thousand Sons for quite a long time. At least Be'lakor doesn't sound like it's going to be getting shot off the board too easily for his points cost, which I think is often a big problem for these big multi-wound models. In any case, pretty fun stuff all around there. Let me know what you think of the leaks and that Warp Storm table in particular. As I mentioned at the start, feel free to check out Wallace's video which is made on the Great Unclean One, which I'll link down in the video description, or the Warhammer site which I'll also link. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep any news of leaks coming, and I'll certainly be reviewing the Codex in full once we get it. Hopefully it won't be too much longer before Games Workshop start previewing a few things themselves. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on this channel and you'd like to help support, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making content like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.